You've endured the challenge of using an ADF for navigation and survived the demanding requirement for thinking. So as a reward, we're going to let you in on a secret feature of your Skyhawk's ADF. Well, maybe not really secret. ADF dials, some of them, have the cardinal compass points on them the same way your Skyhawk's does. The secret is the card is movable. So reach down here to the knob and turn the ADF card until your Skyhawk's present heading is under the index. Now, if you glance over at your instruments, you'll notice that your heading indicator and your ADF dial form pretty much an identical pair. Guess what? The ADF needle no longer shows relative bearing. It now shows the magnetic bearing to the station. That sure can save us some arithmetic. Not only that, but the blunt end of the needle shows the magnetic bearing from the station in case you're of a mind to plot your line of position. Let's look at an example. Suppose you've located yourself somewhere along a particular VOR radial. You'd like to determine your position. Your ADF needle is pointing over here. And when you match the movable card with the heading indicator, the needle is pointing to 300 degrees. By looking at the blunt end of the needle, you know that your magnetic bearing from the station is, well, that's right, it's 120 degrees. You quickly sketch in a line about 120 degrees magnetic from the NDB, and where it crosses the VOR radial is your approximate position. Simple. Sometimes the terminology gets bent around a little, but it amounts to the same thing. Let's set up a real Fantasyland scenario and say that you and another Skyhawk have both had your transponders fail. Unlikely, but this is Fantasyland, okay? ATC is trying to sort you out using primary radar. The controller says, which one of you is crossing the Mugwump NDB 025 outbound bearing? This is still Fantasyland, so let's say your ADF looks like this, with you on an easterly heading. The other guy's looks like this, and he's on an easterly heading too. Who should speak up? Right, the other guy has the blunt end of his needle on 025, so he's crossing the 025 outbound bearing. Can you use this to fly a specific inbound bearing to the station? Sure, but keep in mind the ever-present crosswind. You'll need to crab into the wind just as you would if you were following a course line you had drawn on your chart for dead reckoning navigation. For example, if you were tracking the 330 magnetic bearing to the station with a crosswind from the right, the picture would look like this. The needle would be on 330, and you could think of it as representing the course line. The nose of the airplane on the dial face is clearly to the right, of course, and slightly into the crosswind. Now, a word of warning. Information from the movable card is only as good as the match between the setting of the movable card and the heading indicator. Unless the movable card exactly matches the heading indicator, the numbers on the movable card are just that, numbers. On the average, most pilots are doing a pretty good job if they can hold heading within plus or minus 2.5 degrees. This means a lot of fumbling with the movable card setting and some careful reading when the heading is passing through. Well, why don't they just put the ADF needle on a dial that moves like the heading indicator, you ask? Actually, such a thing exists. It's called an RMI for radio magnetic indicator. The problem with the RMI is that a complete installation costs more than some of the more modern systems available. For your Skyhawk, RMI just isn't cost effective. So that's it. You've seen the ADF with all its idiosyncrasies, outwitted the most difficult things it could throw at you, had it lead you somewhere, and learned some of the tricks that will help you keep your thinking to a minimum. Out with the old and in with the new, they say. Well, now that you've gotten the old part out of the way, in the next lesson we'll introduce you to the new. They call it GPS, for Global Positioning System.